Hello and good afternoon. Welcome back to the second half of today's gathering, American Art History and Digital Scholarship. I am Kelly Quinn and I'm the moderator for this afternoon. If you're just joining us, welcome. If you're just joining us in person, know that in your packet there's a Twitter cheat sheet, and I encourage you to tweet about the conference. We have a lively Twitter stream happening where people are posing questions and swapping ideas and providing each other with information. So that is possible if you are a Twitter person. If you are not a Twitter person and you would like to think with your mobile device, great. Please just put the ringer to silence and your keyboard to silence so that we don't have any disruptions. We've done a really wonderful job of that so far, so thanks for that. We will have 1 hour of talks this afternoon, and then we'll have a brief spot of iced tea and lemonade and some cookies. So know that there is some sugar and gluten in your future. Thank you again for laughing. I really appreciate it. And then we'll have more great ideas, and then wine and cheese. So thank you. We really take food very seriously at the Archives of American Art. This afternoon we have a session that helps us think about, if we use digital tools, how might we present them to the public, and what are the kinds of ways in which we can use these questions of art history and its meaning in places like galleries and also in classrooms. And if you were with us this morning, perhaps you heard me say that we have more extensive speaker bios tucked into your information packets, but also I'll just briefly introduce our speakers for the next session just now, and then we'll proceed. In some circles, in some places, I'm pretty sure if you said the name Rick Powell, all you would have to say is he's a Morehouse and Howard man, because that means something to some people. Maybe not to a lot of people in this room, but that really means something. Thank you again for laughing. I have a specialty in African American studies. So anyway, so here we are. And Richard J. Powell just received our Lawrence Fleischman Prize for excellence in art history. He is known to many of you, I am certain, because of his outstanding scholarship and curatorial work. He's a generous scholar. He's been generous to so many of us. It was, in fact, his student, Katie Gentleson, who won our summer graduate prize. The competition was not rigged, although it is seeming like Duke somehow is dominating, as you do on the court, you do in the scholarship. Anyway, I'm also a college basketball fan. So Richard Powell's going to talk to us today about what happens in a classroom and online when you partner with a museum. And isn't it wonderful that we have a distinguished scholar who's won some of the highest awards that a humanist can win, here to talk to us about teaching and the work of teaching, and that he's also making the digital pivot with us. So thank you. We'll hear from Richard Powell. And then we'll hear from our colleagues Lee Glazer and Maya Fu, who are doing really interesting and exciting work online using Omeka, and then also using mobile devices. And what I love, I think, about what you'll say for us and would share with us this afternoon is that you actually have a curatorial strategy that's different from what Tressa said the avowed strategy of the Warhol is. And that is that you want people to think with their social media, with their devices in the room itself. So what does it mean when you're going to behold a vase and have an app on your phone? So we'll be thinking with Lee and Maya. So an hour-long session today, thinking about the practice of what it means to be a curator in the digital era.
Thank you so much, Kelly, and thanks again to Kate and Liza for the Archive of American Art and this really, really very, very informative conference. I teach art history, and I've taught art history for some years. And I have a confession. The longer I teach, the more challenged I am reading papers. I don't think it has to do with my mental acumen or my intellectual desire and zeal. It's still there. But increasingly, I've struggled with, in particular, undergraduate papers that fall into an easy trap of gathering, of assembling information, increasingly from the internet. I wish more from the library, but that's a whole nother story. And the reiteration of that information in such a way that tells me absolutely nothing other than they really know how to go on the internet and find a lot of stuff that they think is going to make me happy. And increasingly, I've wanted to rethink and reflect on my classes and how I can get my students to do more than that. I have to say I am definitely a firm believer in classes and lectures and midterms and final exams, but I'm also really been grappling with how to get my students to perfect their writing, to perfect their research skills, and to really look within themselves and to find ways of creating knowledge as well as just gathering knowledge. As you've gotten bits and pieces of already from my student Katie Jentelson, Duke is a place where we embrace digital technologies and digital mechanisms and modes of learning. I'm currently affiliated, for the past 2 years I've been affiliated with a lab at Duke called the PhD Lab in Digital Knowledge that's educated me tremendously. And it was my affiliation with that workshop, that laboratory at Duke, that got me to thinking about how I could rethink some of my courses and the assignments for some of my courses. And one of the courses that I teach on a regular basis is a course on African American art. And I've taught this course for a number of years, and as I said, it's been a struggle reading these papers and trying to really get a sense of, do students really get what I'm talking about? Are they able to go beyond a certain level of understanding to something deeper? And I have to say that digital technologies and the possibilities of engaging in the digital has really opened my eyes up to other ways of helping in that educational process. Again, I teach this course, Modern and Contemporary African American Art, and it dawned on me that it might be fun to do an online exhibition. And I stress online because if you're connected to an institution like mine, the idea of an exhibition, period, is an extraordinary undertaking. The idea of gathering objects, the idea of getting loans, the idea of writing extensive exhibition catalogs, the logistics of it can be very complicated. And so I thought, well, maybe it would be possible to do something on a smaller scale digitally with my students. So with the help of the folks at the PhD Lab at Duke in Digital Knowledge and with the National Museum of Art at Duke University, we came up with a concept. And I'll talk about that concept. The idea was to organize an exhibit, both a digital virtual exhibition, but also, and I really want to underscore this, objects that students can access face-to-face. And what that meant was identifying a group of objects within a 45-mile radius of the classroom. And that included objects within the National Museum of Art. It included objects from the Ackland Museum of Art at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. It included objects from North Carolina Central University, important historically black school in Durham. And we even went as far as the Weatherspoon Gallery at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, and other collections, public and private. And the show, or rather the title of my talk today, is a student-curated project, but one would have to kind of qualify that because in order to make this project work, I had to do some preliminary work, and that work initially was involved with identifying a group of objects in advance. And I was just saying earlier to my co-speakers this afternoon that one of the challenges of doing digital projects is that the conventional quarter system or semester system doesn't cut it. You cannot do a project successfully if you only have a few months to pull it all together. And so with this exhibit, African American Close-Up, I started this project the summer before. And as I said, I identified a group of objects within a 45-mile radius, about 38, 40, give or take. And then I started the process of getting permissions. Permissions to reproduce these images on a website. Also, I had to generate the actual digital images from collectors and various sources. I should also say that this is a show of prints, drawings, and works on paper primarily. So the good news with with selections on paper, smaller scale works, is that when it comes to a reproduction digitally, it's not going to be as dramatically off as a huge painting might be. It also meant that if you had a multiple, you could get that image from whatever source might be available to you in terms of the artist, him or herself, a gallery, which might be in New York, or the collection itself in the 45-mile radius of Duke. And so that's what I did the summer of 2012. And after the end of that summer, I actually had all of the digital images, and I had permissions from all of the copyright holders. And then I presented this material to my this material to my students. And the assignment, which is described here, because of the National Museum's is the repository for, or is in close proximity to, many important works of art by and about African Americans. It was decided that rather than requiring a conventional term paper, students might benefit more from conducting original research on works of art that they could see in person. And basically, I presented this material to students, and I gave them the opportunity to identify the works that they were interested in writing about. And I had an elaborate process by which students were able to make their selections and to do it in kind of a descending order of preferences. And everybody had at least the opportunity to do one, and some really enterprising students wanted to do 2 and do 3. And it basically worked out that everybody had a chance to write about at least one work of art. Now, my assignment wasn't just write about a work of art. It was a little more focused than that. I really leaned on students and encouraged my students to follow a particular format. And the format is something that I've been doing as an art historian, or have done as an art historian for many, many years. And the first step was simply to encourage my students to look at the object that they had selected and to describe the object that they selected. And you'd be surprised at how challenged students were not to go to a book, not to go online, but simply to look at that object and have to write about it for about 100 or so words. They struggled with that over the course of the semester. And then the next step was for the next 100 words to kind of marshal the basic information either about the artist or about the context in which that art was created. And that was a little easier for them, and that did require that initial research. And then the next step, or the next 100 words, had to do with the touchy-feely part of analysis and interrogation of an object. In other words, now that you've given this very objective look at what it is that you're looking at and description, and then the next step was this kind of not formal, but official background fill-in. Now just vent. Now give me your vibe. Tell me what it is that you like. Tell me what it is that you don't like. Tell me what it is that you think what's happening, or how you're feeling this piece. In other words, subjective all the way. That was actually a struggle in some ways too. Then beyond that, I said, now I want you to kind of encapsulate all of this, what you've described, what you have learned from the literature, what you are thinking and feeling and assuming might be happening, and summarize this for me in maybe a couple of 100 words. So basically they had a 500-word limit for their online entries. And what was really exciting about this was that we worked with everybody's individual entry in class. So in other words, it wasn't just teacher critiquing and interrogating and questioning the choice of this word versus another word, or this source versus another source. It was the class as a whole kind of dealing with each and everyone's respective entry for this online exhibit. And what I found really very fulfilling about this assignment was that there was this kind of modicum towards the gathering of knowledge and information that I'm pretty certain a lot of it came from kind of easy and quick sources, although the other part of the assignment was that they also had to provide a fairly lengthy bibliography that included primary and secondary sources. So that part was fulfilled. But the other part of this, and I was talking about this at lunch today, was that students didn't realize it, but they were creating their own content. They were actually inscribing and putting into these entries their own voices, their own perceptions, their own meditations on these objects. And they didn't realize it, but they were actually creating content that would compete ultimately with all of the things that I'm sure you all have read about artworks online that seem absolutely ridiculous and make no sense. So we were lucky because I worked with a great team. I was listening this morning to all the fantastic presenters, and they were talking about the collaborations, and I am by no means savvy in a lot of this, but I know enough to get by. And I was introduced to I've been doing WordPress for some time. I've done some other projects with WordPress, blogs and what have you. But WordPress, as so many of you probably know already, has these wonderful themes that can be employed and with a little modification can really suit your purposes. And I was trying to figure out, how does one successfully do an online exhibition that works online? And some of you are probably familiar with the software Infinity. It's a presentation portfolio that's on WordPress that has a particular format that lends itself for people who are maybe presenting a variety of images that you want kind of cutaways for additional information on. And I just found that this Infinity software was perfect. And one of the things that I liked about this theme is that it allowed for multiple views of a high-res image to be a part of the experience. And it also involves something that I forgot to mention earlier that I also asked my students to do, and that was not just writing this entry, but to create their own categories and tags for their entry. And the conversation we were having earlier about the FSA images and the kinds of information or slash misinformation, or just the varieties of information that might be logged into a particular object, my students were confronted with the reality of having to kind of encapsulate in a series of words, categories, and tags for these artworks. And what they didn't realize they were doing in the process of this very computer basic skill was a kind of a sub-curation process, where if you have a series of words and those words get attached to an object, they invariably create a way that viewers of this exhibition will embrace. But anyway, on to the exhibit. So again, it's about 38 pieces, and I'll just start with the first one, because it's all lined up alphabetical here. And this is a work by Charles Alston, artist who worked in New York in the 1930s through the 1970s, and was actually the teacher of Jake Lawrence. And he did this mural sketch, and it's from the Ackland Museum in Chapel Hill. And it's a really interesting and strange piece in the sense that it's this drawing, and it's a very long, let me see if the particulars are here for it. Well, anyway, here's here it is, the tombstone, as it's called. Yeah, 9 by 82.5 inches. And then the student wrote the following: "This piece is a preliminary sketch for an unidentified mural. Freely drawn in black, white, and red chalk, the subject is elusive. Discernible are figures at work carrying and pushing items on what may be a construction site. A seamstress or craftsperson is in the center of the composition, as well as other figures in motion, and the barely recognizable image of a train in the lower left corner. People are shown playing music, dancing, and worshiping. More detailed elements are executed in black chalk, with highlights and other figural portions of the left side in white chalk. The drawing is almost 9 times as wide as it is high." And then we get the basic information about Alston, which you can read on your own. But I like these kind of towards the end. A mural sketch reflects Alston's experimentation with abstraction in the 1950s, coinciding with the artist entering abstract work in a juried show at New York's Metropolitan Museum and winning the competition. Though the drawing is clearly a study, it has a vibrant, animated quality, no doubt the product of the many bustling figures within the composition. Loosely demarcated sections of the sketch represent different life experiences, each providing viewers with distinct emotional feelings. Read from left to right, the drawing depicts travel, work, worship, education, political campaigning, banking, and leisure activities, the latter both socially acceptable and clandestine. The sketch also has a parallel abstract dynamism in the blotted red and black chalk markings throughout the composition, providing movement and cohesion to the overall image. And so an assignment like this, to me, ended up doing something really remarkable. Not only did it kind of fulfill this need in me as a teacher to, give me those basics, do your research, but also to get students to realize that they have this capacity to provide really vital, interesting, compelling, informative information about a work of art. And it's not necessarily something that you'll find in a book. It's something that you can generate yourself. And as I said, Chelsea, in this case, gave some tags. In this case, we've got abstraction, drawing, group scenes. So let me just click onto one of those. Let me do, I'll do abstraction. Okay. And so what Infinity does is that it kind of takes you to that tag, and then you open up with all of the works that the students collectively and individually decided would fall under that category, abstraction. So it creates a new set of pictures, a new set of relationships. And it's also interesting how that term gets played with the range of things that one sees in this panoply of images. Well, one piece I'm going to show you that I think is really interesting, and it brings to mind this morning's talks, is this work here, which is in the collection at Duke University. Bob Thompson's Untitled from 1963, and you get all these wonderful details with infinity. It's a gouache. And it was the gift of Paula Cooper to Duke. And then the student describes it as follows. On the left side of this square-shaped painting is a female nude with blue shoulder-length hair. She assumes a graceful dancer's pose in a cove overlooking water, which is as blue and vibrant as her hair. She gazes towards the water, where a ferocious monster with its mouth wide open is ready to capture a red male newt suspended in the sky and above the water, clutching a yellow bird-like creature by its legs. I remember struggling with this student to get her to do the basics on this. But let me just roll you to the end, where she summarizes this. We don't know what Bob Thompson intended in creating this painting, or if he even knew what he meant to communicate with this symbolic figure and brilliant colors. Thompson was affected by the free-form jazz music of his times, making those sounds comparable to his art, and like jazz, taking something that already existed and giving it his own interpretation. We do know that Thompson often borrowed compositions from the Renaissance masters like Masaccio, Piero della Francesca, Raphael, Michelangelo, and Titian. Clearly, Titian's story, mythological painting of the mythological legend of Perseus and Andromeda inspired this painting. This Greek myth told the story of Perseus, the son of the god Zeus, who discovered and rescued the Ethiopian princess Andromeda. When Perseus finds Andromeda tied to a rock by the sea, soon to be devoured by a sea monster, he slays the monster and marries Andromeda. As ambiguous and undefined as the figures and symbols are in this and many other Thompson paintings, he used these motifs as points of artistic departure and liberation, creating his own private world where he was not confined by the racial tensions and artistic conventions of his time in order to create a new type of American figurative painting where the possibilities were endless. And I found that an assignment like this provided an avenue, possible endless possibilities for getting students who otherwise might give you very, very perfunctory kind of assignments and papers with something fresh and something that they really dig into themselves. And so after all these years of teaching art history, leave it to digital technology to kind of reinvigorate me and get me to thinking about new ways of getting my students to dig deeper into learning and understanding American art. Thank you.